After surviving their encounter with Mid-Valley in the last arc and the intense Mexican standoff with Legato and the other servants of the genocidal knives, Vash the Stampede, Nicholas D. Wolfwood, Millie Thompson, and Meryl Streep are all nursing their wounds and coming to terms with what they learned during the conflict. But the world won't stop for them, as Knives and his surviving allies are gathering, moving, and also learning new information that is forcing them to act against mankind. Meaning that Vash the Stampede doesn't have much time and must confront his sins and his past before finally battling his elder brother. Meanwhile, Wolfwood has his own secrets that are coming to a head, alongside a lifetime of choices with consequences that might destroy him. Volume 6 of Trigun Maximum, Gunslinger, there are 2 volumes in this series with the exact same title and I don't understand why, is a short storyline where the action is basically just the subplot to allow for character building, which is ideal. Yasuhiro Naitao is really good at character work, but not that great with action in his manga. There are a lot of great moments here. Naitao excels with conversation scenes now. Some of the best artwork in the entire series is in Wolfwood's story. When the action breaks out, it gets messy like always, but the ideas are interesting, and the series finds new and exciting ways to show off Vash's talent for non-lethal gunshots and his status as the sharpest shooter on the planet. The biggest weakness of Volume 6 is Millie and Meryl. While they do each get some focus, it is to drop them out of the plot. Now this makes sense because they just could not continue being involved in the same way they were involved in the last arc, and it builds on Meryl almost being consumed by Vash's mutated body and having images of the Lost July disaster forced into her mind. It's a fairly natural way for the story to address that event and that trauma. However, it suffers because they don't have very distinct personalities. It seems like Naitao expects you to have seen the anime by this point, which fleshed them out a lot better. The two work as normal people trapped in a world of larger-than-life figures, but they suffer from being less interesting than a lot of the other normal people trapped in a world of larger-than-life figures, meaning that it doesn't have the impact that it should, despite ultimately at least being a little bit sad. For example, Volume 7, Happy Days, has a great chapter of Vash and Wolfwood in a bar. They talk with and about men who drink away their regrets and their suffering. That short story has got a very good mix of empathy and cynicism that basically shows what Vash the Stampede fights for and what makes him a good person without overstating it, while also showing that his non-human origins don't stop him from having the same problems of shame and regret that humans carry. It's just his approach and the scale of his history that makes a difference. Which makes this a very good time, literally halfway through the entire series, to just put the cards on the table, because the past revelations of previous volumes are extremely important to this part of the story, and if you don't want to be spoiled about them, you've been warned. Vash the Stampede and his brother, Million's Knives, are not human. We know that. They are man-made life forms designed to refashion worlds and empower humanity, known as plants. Like nuclear power plants. Knives is so powerful and unstable that he is actually compared to an atom bomb here. However, unlike the rest of their kind that we've seen in the story, who are pretty much trapped inside power stations and giant glass domes and light bulbs, the two of them are capable of moving and acting on their own. In the past, Knives forced a fleet of human ships to crash land on this near-dead world, and Vash has been chasing him ever since to stop him from hurting anyone. The other important impossible to tiptoe around revelation is for our other leading hero. Vash and Wolfwood have beaten 8 of the 13 gung-ho guns, which certainly sounds ideal. There are less than half of them left over. But there is a problem with the 9th that I can now spoil after the last arc because it's impossible to continue without mentioning at this point. Wolfwood is one of the gung-ho guns under the name of Chapel. Unlike the others who have all been ordered to torture Vash by Legato Blue Summers, Chapel was ordered to protect Vash at any cost in order to bring him to Knives. which Wolfwood has been doing, even killing other members of the Gung-Ho Guns to do it, in order to fulfill his own agenda, in the hopes that Vash will beat Knives and save mankind from genocide, or that the brothers will fight and kill each other in the process and leave humanity in peace, especially now that rescue ships are coming to save those who are trapped on this wasteland world. In addition to all of the religious issues that Wolfwood's pragmatism and brutality bring into his conflict with Vash's near saintly devotion to love and peace, this secret is just another part of what makes Vash's relationship with Wolfwood so interesting. Wolfwood views Vash as a threat, but has grown to view him as a friend in some way, even if he doesn't express it particularly well. While Vash is aware that something is going on, but continues to give Wolfwood the benefit of the doubt. Wolfwood is not just a mysterious character, he is a very conflicted character. We've seen this through his good intentions clashing with his ruthless methods, including holding an innocent person at gunpoint in the last arc and threatening to shoot them if they didn't leave the area, in the hopes that they wouldn't get hurt during his fight. This leads to some amazing moments in Volume 6, which show just how compromised Wolfwood has become, what his actual fears and what his limitations are. It really helps to build the camaraderie between the two. As a priest and a drifting optimist with angel-like powers, the pair has to have faith in each other, especially as Vash understands Wolfwood's decisions to kill when no other option is clear. Even if he doesn't like it, Vash does highlight that Wolfwood's actions can save and help other people, even if he doesn't believe that Wolfwood can save himself through those means. On the other side of the coin, we have Legato Blue Summers, Knives, and the recently introduced Elendira, the Crimson Nail. Elendira is an extremely powerful woman armed with a strange weapon that serves Knives and clearly hates Legato Blue Summers, even throwing her drink in his face at one point. Given how everybody else is afraid of Blue Summers, it should come as no surprise that she is extremely powerful and important to Knives in some way that's very mysterious and loosely defined. If her introduction in the last arc didn't give that away, when she instantly overpowered and outmaneuvered everybody. Unlike everyone else, she isn't too worried about Knives, while also not being insane to the point of not caring. She and Legato both know that Knives will kill them at some point. Elendira wants to see his plans through because she thinks it'll be interesting and it'll let her live the longest life possible with the most freedom to do as she likes because she believes that nothing can stop Knives. Still, she does seem a bit jealous that Legato is second in command and is also able to get away with so much. The Gung-Ho Guns that Vash has been working his way through are Knives' personal army, and he wants Vash unharmed. Legato has ordered them without anyone's permission, because Knives was effectively dead when Legato decided to do it, to torture Vash, and has been using them exclusively to harm him. While Elendira is playful, sarcastic, and loyal enough, Legato Blue Summers is an entirely different beast. Knives broke Legato's spine during their last meeting with Vash, and he has been paralyzed ever since. In the context of the story, he has been unable to move for 2 years. Throughout the series, he was dragged around by this strange eyeless golem until Elendira killed it. Now he's stuck in a coffin, unable to move anything below his neck. He's still terrifying. Even if Legato can't slaughter whole towns as quickly as Knives does, his methods are far more disgusting and unnerving, as Legato's power is to manipulate the bodies of others, and he can mainly use it to force people to tear themselves apart, or worse. He also clearly gets pleasure out of doing it, unlike Knives who views his killings with cold disdain. Having his spine destroyed by his master did not damage Legato's loyalty in any way, even though his mental state has clearly been deteriorating through the entire series, partly as a result of that. He is a true fanatic, and his dialogue makes him explain himself very carefully. For the most part, he doesn't really care about Elendira or what she says or thinks. He is enough to carry out Knives' will. Elendira is a lightning bolt, swift, powerful, destructive, and targeted. Legato is slaughter in a coffin. He specializes in mass murder and clearly thinks the scale of his powers are beyond her understanding. The focus given to Legato Bluesummers is very brief in this arc, but it's also very effective. Volume 6 has him basically admitting that the game of death he's been playing with Vash was something he started for purely emotional reasons, and all of the gimmicks he added to it don't really mean anything. And now it's all spiraled out of control, but he's too invested in what's happening to actually stop it. It's very rare for a character to openly admit that their plan didn't make much sense, but also then for the series to make that moment a meaningful character scene that highlights their ever-growing madness, especially in a character that came across like a stoic mastermind. Vash doesn't even have the coin case Legato gave him to collect the trinkets from defeating the Gung Ho Gun members. He lost it before the time skip into Maximum. But the rules haven't changed. People are still leaving behind their coins upon their defeat or death. They have no value to Legato or to Vash, but they are becoming meaningful as time goes on. Now that's all interesting, and might make you think that it's all about the journey creating the meaning behind what the symbol means to the characters. That is what it is, but Night Owl will make this literal by the end of the manga, and I don't know what to make of that. Volume 6 also introduces the final members of the Gung Ho Guns, the Double Fang and the Trip of Death. The pair have a very good introduction, despite not being that interesting yet. That does start to change later on. This volume gets a lot of stuff done in terms of setting up plot points and characterization for the majority of the cast. Volume 7 is about the history of Vash, Knives, and the woman called Rem that Vash idolizes and Knives hates for destroying his brother, while also moving towards the big confrontation the series has been leading up to, since it returned as Maximum. Explaining how these two twin brothers became so extreme in their values is difficult, especially as Knives has been plotting mankind's extinction for over 100 years, while his brother has become this free-spirited guardian angel to all people at all times. Night Owl manages to think of something that is appropriately horrific, and the actual moment of Knives turning his back on Grace after a life of relative normalcy is perfect. And it really exploits the fact that this is a seinen manga now that is aimed at a much older audience. It's part of the flashback of their childhood that works really well and is really helped by the art and the paneling. Likewise, the reason Vash doesn't turn away from goodness is perfectly shown as well. You can see exactly how close he comes to becoming like Knives, but what forced him down a different path. And if that intervention didn't happen, or if Knives was in his shoes at that moment, they might have both become monsters, or they might have switched places. Despite Rem herself being such a huge part of Vash's motivation, they don't spend a lot of time together in the manga. Yet the main conversation they actually have, a conversation that will help to define Vash's entire worldview, is really good. I just think that another 2 chapters, to better establish this connection would have improved things substantially. Million's Knives himself gets a lot of focus during these 2 volumes. It's almost as if the flashback to his and Vash's childhood is shown from his perspective. This is good because Knives has spent most of 5 volumes of this monthly series and many years just sitting around and waiting for things to happen, or being dead. Until now, he's just been waiting for Vash. The story has now given him 2 different reasons to begin moving forward towards his goals, and fairly naturally, rapidly accelerating his pace to bring us forward to the main conflict just ahead. His motivations are finally revealed to the audience, and this volume finally explains how Knives had this human doctor who helped to bring him back to life in the original series. That doctor gets an origin and an actual reason to serve Knives, as limited and small as it is. It's just a nice plot point that helps to fill a gap in the series. Knives' motivation is actually quite simple. Human beings exploit plants beyond their breaking points, and Knives just doesn't want his kind to suffer, especially at the hands of what he sees as a lesser race. While Knives is written as the villain, the art does a fantastic job of highlighting the disgusting aspects of humanity, and explaining why Knives is so volatile. How he snapped is very well done, and his main positive trait really comes through in Volume 6. There is a hint of deep hypocrisy underlining all of his actions, but Knives ultimately cares about his brother more than he cares about anything else. Even his own health is nothing compared to the sorrow he feels towards Vash's own suffering and slavish devotion to humanity. From Knives' point of view, Vash is insane and just hurting himself for nothing, and Knives just wants his brother to understand this. The art also helps to give Knives a new sense of scale. Now that we know that Knives doesn't have to remain in a human shape, Night Owl gets really otherworldly with how Knives shifts and mutates his bodies into new forms. There is an amazing panel where Knives' arms are simply too long, and it's very clearly deliberate and very clearly unsettling. There are also other moments where it's impossible to tell what parts of his body are blades, wings, flesh, or other materials. All of those various shifting designs do a great job of establishing why this is somebody who is a threat to the entire world, and a good example of Night Owl's love of detail being used well, because Knives' forms and weaponry are greatly enhanced by that. Now we get to the big fight at the end of Volume 7, which has as many problems as it has achievements. You have to understand that Vash, and apparently Knives, can transmit their memories and feelings into other people and connect with the plants directly. This was implied a long time ago, and became part of a major moment in the last arc, but the series has never explicitly stated that. Humans in this series also seem to have the ability to detect murderous desire, but that might just be the killing intent found in other manga and Japanese media that isn't explained, nor does it fit in this context. These vague elements of emotional and mental transfer are extremely important to what happens in Volume 7, and why certain characters act in certain ways. The fact I have to explain this to you in a review that's trying as hard as it can to avoid spoiling the story should tell you how vaguely this is all presented, despite it being so very, very important, especially going forward. Now, the fight is fast and has some very creative uses of Knives' powers. He comes across as extremely threatening and monstrous when you can tell what is happening. With most of Night Owl's fights, the motion is hard to follow, and that's very difficult when Knives' body is twisting beyond comprehension. There is also a problem with the dialogue. While Vash's dialogue is poetic and well thought out, Knives talks like he's a standard supervillain who just hates people. Vash's love for people, or at least his desire to love them, is presented in a much better way, because it is presented as wishful instead of factual and builds on his actions and interactions throughout the entire series. Knives does not get that amount of care put into his dialogue, despite this period of the series going so far to show him to be more complex than we originally thought. Furthermore, it's become clear that EG9 was a mistake when reading this. Knives talks about how his killers are the worst and the best all of humanity has to offer. Then you remember that one with the giant tennis ball outfit and the sharp hair, who was also the one to lose in less than 10 pages, which also helps you realize that Knives made some terrible decisions in selecting his private army. Some of them were gun-toting lunatics that killed dozens of people. Dominique was an elegant assassin with a useful power, and the others all had things of value to offer the series. Mine was nothing. I don't think they have ever mentioned him by name at any point in the series after his defeat. That's the problem with the series taking so long to find its direction originally. it leads to some notable inconsistencies with how seriously we are meant to take some of these villains, which will come up later on. Gunslinger and Happy Days ultimately continue the endless dance of Night Owl. Poor execution limits what the action scenes can do, but his talent for character writing is shining through, and his art has improved to the point where it's mostly serviceable. While the supporting characters remain underused and some of the dialogue isn't up to par, but the simple story continues to move forward, and all of the character arcs remain fascinating, especially during these quieter times. The fact that this arc does not focus on action all that much until the end plays to the entire series' strengths. Unlike previous volumes, there are fewer weaknesses here to worry about, and Volume 6 and Volume 7 of Trigun Maximum are the series coming into its own, and you can see that it's gaining momentum as the events unfold. The next arc is very short, but it is very much worth talking about, and I look forward to meeting you once again for Trigun Maximum. Thank you for watching. Good night.